Alright, so we're on filters. Excuse me. We're going to talk about validation and sanitization. And let's jump right into it, right? Now, from the beginning of this lectures, we've talked mostly about variables, right? We've looked at a simple variable that takes a static value. We've looked at an indexed array, this one. We've also looked at associative arrays, right? This one. This is basically an associative array that is that has its values as other variables, right? And then we've also talked about the super global array, right? With a static value. We've talked about a session super global variable, right? And then last topic we looked at the get super global variable, which basically gets data from the URL like so, right? Yeah. And then we've talked about the post super global variable, which collects data from values, right? Now, when you collect data and keep it in an array, you will have to do something on the data, right? Now, before you do anything on the data, you have to do something called validation, right? You need to validate the data. So what I'm going to do, I'll just demonstrate one example for you. I went ahead and I added some things to this form. All right, first I gave it a get request, all right, and I'm submitting it on the same page. That's why you see the PHP server self, and then I'm also collecting the variables, all right. So let's go to the form now, and let's see something here. This is the email field for email, right? And I will just put my name there instead of my email, and the password I can put anything, and then I'll submit this form. Alright, now this form gets submitted and it's being processed, even though the the email is not an email, right? So you can imagine if we just went ahead and processed this file, probably sent it to our database, you can imagine the mess we're going to be having in our database, right? Now that's why the validation comes in handy. All right, now the PHP contributors have already created functions to do this for you. All right, I believe you now understand the concept. Now let me first talk about what validation really means, or the difference. Validation is when you are checking to see if the data that was entered was proper, right? Like what happened here. This is an improper data for this field name, right? Now we don't have any validation in place, so nothing happened, right? And then sanitizing data is when you remove illegal characters, all right? For example, if I get in here and then I type something like this is a script, this is a JavaScript alert. If I should run this, let me run this in this PHP. Let me run it here and see what happens, right? So I created a script called alert hacked, right? Now, if I go to my browser, you can see this is a real script working here. I get a hacked alert, right? Now, if I put this in here, all right, and I don't validate this, it could actually get into my database or whatever and mess up with my files or my data. Okay, this is how websites get hacked. All right, this is one example. It's called cross-site scripting. You can see I just submitted the data and this is what I get, right? So I'm hacked. In fact, I just hacked myself now. Anyway, you want to validate your data, your variables, all right? Wherever you're getting them from, you really want to validate them before you process them, all right? So now there are, like I said, there are functions that have already been created for us to perform this validation. All right, and one of them is the HTML special class. This one will basically convert all your character fields into HTML special characters, right? And the strip slashes will take out the slashes and stuff like that. And then the trim also works like any of these, right? Now the function that I like using most, and I will encourage you to be using most, is the filter var function. All right, now this function does both validation and sanitization. Okay, and it takes 3 parameters basically. The first parameter it takes is the variable. All right, so if I want to verify or validate this get request that is coming in, I can just pass it through to this one. Right now, if I just save this and I go to my browser, let me comment this out first. Right, I go to the browser, I get HTML special class expects at least 1 parameter, right? The same thing goes for strip slashes and trim. This is because you need to pass in your variables, all right, before these can work, right? So I can do something like this, and you can pass in any variable at all, any variable. It could be an array variable, it could be a session variable, it could be a post, data variable. It could be any variable. You can validate any variable that you want. Okay, I was talking about the one that I like using most, which is the trim and the filter var. But the filter var does both the sanitization and the validation. Now, I said it takes in 3 parameters. One will be the name of the variable. All right, so you can either do this users, you can do users here. All right, and then the second one takes the filter name. This one is optional. All right, and the filter names look something like this. For example, if you want, the value in this variable is a string, then you probably do in uppercase, right? Filter underscore validate underscore string. Okay, like so, and this string gets validated. All right, now if this is an email, if the value you're getting inside this variable is an email, you probably do email here. Right, now if you go to W3 schools, you go to PHP and then you look for the filter var function. This one, you're going to learn a lot about the types that you can pass in with the variable. All right, so you can validate email with a filter var email. You can validate an integer. All right, you can validate even an IP, a URL, email. This is sanitize. You can sanitize an email, right? We're probably going to use this. Let's jump into something that let's try and validate. And I've explained the concept and how it's used. Now let's look at when it's used. All right, so in this example, I've got a form that I'm collecting the password and the email using the get request. Right now, I want to clean this. What I would do, and what you should do, is collect the first data. All right, and call it input data or raw data, or you know what I'm saying, something that you will recognize that this is the raw data that is coming in. Right, so now we collected the raw data of password and email, and we passed it through to these variables. Right, now we can actually trim these. Right, now you might not want to trim a password because some passwords have some values in there, some symbols in there, right? So we can actually put this in a bracket and say trim the email. You see that? So now we called the trim function. All right, and we passed in the get variable, the get superglobal that is getting the email from the URL. All right, now we can now say filter underscore var. All right, and then we open our bracket and we pass in this one, this email here, right? The raw email, because that is the first parameter that it takes, right? Comma. And what do we want to do? Actually, from this trim function, I can say that we are already validating the sanitizing the data, I should say. We're already cleaning, right, the data. So we are sanitizing the data, right? Now we can call our filter underscore validate, right? Filter validate email, right? Function here, parameter I should say. And then now we assign this to, let's just say, we can say clean underscore email. You see that? Clean underscore email. So clean underscore email equals filter var raw, a raw email, the one we're getting, right? And then now this is what we need to use. Now we can't go using this now because this is just coming from the form, right? So we are validating this email here. Now let's go ahead and check this out. All right, now we're not going to echo the raw email again. We're going to echo the clean email, right? So let's see what happens. Right, so now I think I've passed the variable into the code. Let's go to our form. So I will write my name because that's what I wrote, right? My name, and then I will say something here, and then I submit, and we get nothing. All right, we get nothing because that is not a valid input. All right, if I put a valid email, then we're getting the valid email now, right? Let me try again. I put a valid email and a password, and then I submit. Then now we're getting the valid email and the password. You see that? So this is what validations do. All right, always try to clean your variables before you use them. All right, and you can simply use these two functions. The trim function, all right, you call the trim function, and into bracket you pass in your variable, the raw variable, all right, or the one you're getting, and then you can use the filter var to validate, all right, the variable that you got. And then after cleaning it, you can now pass it through your codes and process it, right? So that's what we've done. I hope you understand what validation is, and the concept and how it's used and when it's used, and this is a real example of how it can be used. And if you don't validate your data, you saw what happened with the script, right? I just hacked myself right there. So if you don't validate your data, you're gonna get hacked, and that will take away your reputation too. All right, so I'll see you on the next lecture.